My ex-husband likes to tell people he caught me cheating on my birthday, as if he's some kind of hero who exposed a villain. What he doesn't tell them is how he orchestrated the whole thing to humiliate me in the most cruel way possible, or how our marriage had been dead for months before I found comfort with someone who actually cared about me. Now he's the victim in everyone's eyes while I'm the heartless cheater who deserved what I got. I'm Rachel, and 2 years ago, my life imploded in the most spectacular way. Not because I was having an affair, though yes, I was seeing someone else, but because my husband Brandon decided that public humiliation was better than having an adult conversation about our failing marriage. Looking back, I should have left him long before things got to that point. The red flags were everywhere, but I kept making excuses, kept hoping the man I'd married would come back. He never did. We'd only been married for 2 years, together for 3. In the beginning, Brandon was attentive, romantic even. He'd bring me flowers just because, plan surprise dates, text me sweet messages during the day. I thought I'd found my person, but something shifted after the wedding, like he'd crossed some finish line and didn't need to try anymore. The man who used to plan elaborate dates started forgetting we had plans at all. Oh, was that tonight? The guys invited me to Dave's house for the game. No apology, no rescheduling, just assumption that his plans mattered more. The sweet texts stopped. If I messaged him during the day, I'd get one-word responses hours later. "Kay, sure am I? Busy." Meanwhile, I'd see him active on social media, commenting on everyone else's posts, just not responding to his wife. Our relationship had been circling the drain for over a year. Brandon was never home, always out with his buddies, treating our apartment like a hotel. When he was home, he'd barely look at me, just grunt responses while playing video games or scrolling through his phone. I'd try to talk about my day, about us, about anything, and he'd just say, "Uh-huh," without even listening. "We need to talk about us," I'd say. "Later, babe. The guys are waiting for me online." Later never came. Neither did affection, attention, or any indication that I was more than just someone who shared his bed and split the rent. Then I met Daniel. He worked in my building and we started talking during lunch breaks. Nothing inappropriate at first, just 2 people who actually listened to each other. He remembered things I told him, asked follow-up questions, made me laugh. When I mentioned I was stressed about a presentation, he'd check in later to see how it went. Basic human kindness that I'd forgotten existed. Daniel worked for a marketing firm on the 3rd floor. We met in the elevator during a particularly bad day. I'd been crying in the bathroom after another morning of Brandon ignoring me completely, not even acknowledging when I said goodbye. My mascara was smudged, and Daniel handed me a tissue without a word. "Rough morning?" he asked gently. "Something like that," I managed. "Coffee helps. There's a great place around the corner that does this amazing lavender latte. Sounds weird, but trust me." That's how it started. Coffee between 2 professionals in the same building. He was going through his own relationship troubles. His girlfriend of 5 years had just moved out. We bonded over heartbreak, over feeling invisible in our own relationships. "Your husband's a lucky man," Daniel said one day after I'd helped him with a project. "He doesn't seem to think so," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. "Then he's an idiot," Daniel said simply, not flirting, just stating what seemed obvious to him. That's when things shifted. Daniel started noticing what Brandon ignored. When I'd gotten my hair done, when I was having a rough day, when I needed someone to just listen. After months of being invisible in my own marriage, having someone see me was intoxicating. The texting Brandon complains about? Yes, I was texting Daniel, but also my mother, my sister, my friends, people who actually wanted to talk to me. When Brandon would ask what was so funny, it was easier to say just mom than explain that someone was actually interested in my thoughts and made me smile. God forbid I be happy about something that didn't involve him. I remember one specific night that encapsulates our entire marriage. I was on the couch, laughing at something my sister had sent me, a funny video of my nephew trying to walk. Brandon looked up from his game for the first time in hours. "What's so funny?" he asked, suspicion already in his voice. "Just Emma. Look, Tommy's trying to—" "You're always on that phone," he interrupted. "Who are you really texting?" "I just told you, Emma sent—" "Whatever." Back to his game, but now with this energy in the room, like I'd done something wrong by smiling at my nephew. The leaving work early thing he mentions? I was going to therapy. Individual therapy because Brandon refused couples counseling, said it was a waste of money and we were fine. But I'd tell my coworkers I was still there because I didn't want them gossiping about my personal life. How Brandon twisted that into evidence of cheating, I'll never know. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Reeves, had been recommended by a friend who'd gone through a divorce. "You need to talk to someone," she'd said, seeing how miserable I was. "Brandon won't go to couples therapy," I'd explained. "Then go by yourself. You deserve support." Every Thursday at 3 p.m., I'd leave work and drive to her office, spending an hour trying to understand why my marriage felt like a prison. Brandon thought I was working late on Thursdays. It was easier than explaining that I needed professional help to cope with his indifference. The milk incident everyone finds so damning? I really did go to get milk. But I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour, crying, trying to work up the courage to go back to that apartment where I felt like a ghost. Daniel called to check on me. He knew I'd been struggling, and we talked until I felt strong enough to face another night of being ignored. That night haunts me still, but not for the reasons Brandon thinks. We'd had another fight. If you can call me trying to talk and him stonewalling me a fight. I'd made his favorite dinner, set the table nicely, even bought wine. When he came home, he grabbed his plate and headed to his gaming setup. "I thought we could eat together," I said. "I'm in the middle of a raid. Can't pause it." "Brandon, we haven't had a meal together in weeks." "Jesus, Rachel, why are you being so needy? I'm literally right here. Right here, but a million miles away." I cleaned up dinner alone, put the wine back, and realized we were out of milk for morning coffee. It was 11:30 p.m., but I needed to get out of that apartment before I screamed. At the store, I sat in my car with the milk getting warm, sobbing. When Daniel called, he'd seen my earlier text about the failed dinner. His voice broke through my despair. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm at the grocery store parking lot crying over milk," I laughed bitterly. "I'm pathetic." "You're not pathetic. You're hurting. Talk to me." So I did. For an hour, I sat in that parking lot, pouring out my heart to someone who actually listened. When I finally got home at 2 a.m., Brandon was asleep. He never even asked where I'd been the next morning. As for my birthday, I suggested Brandon go out of town because I couldn't bear another year of him forgetting it entirely or doing some last-minute gas station gift. The previous year, he'd given me a car air freshener. The year before that, nothing at all. "I thought we weren't doing gifts," he'd said when he saw me crying. So yes, I made plans with Daniel for my birthday. Someone who actually wanted to celebrate me, who saw it as more than just another day. Someone who'd planned something special not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The champagne and glasses Brandon found, those were mine hidden because I knew he'd drink them if he found them. I was planning to have a glass alone after he left, a private toast to surviving another year in a marriage that was slowly killing me. That morning, Daniel came over early with breakfast and flowers, things Brandon had never done in our entire relationship. We were talking, laughing, feeling like actual humans instead of roommates who happened to share a bed. One thing led to another, and yes, we were intimate. In my own bed, in my own home, with someone who actually desired me. He'd arrived at 7:30 with croissants from the French bakery downtown, fresh strawberries and yellow tulips. My favorite flowers, something he'd remembered from a casual conversation weeks ago. Brandon didn't even know I preferred tulips to roses. "Happy birthday, beautiful," Daniel said, setting everything up on the kitchen counter while I made coffee. 32 looks good on you." "You remembered," I said, touched beyond words. Of course I remembered. How could I forget? We sat at my kitchen table, the one where Brandon never ate anymore, talking and laughing like normal people. Daniel told me about his promotion, asked about my presentation next week, actually engaged in conversation like I was interesting, like I mattered. When he kissed me, it wasn't planned. We were laughing about something, I can't even remember what now. And suddenly his lips were on mine, and I felt alive for the first time in months. Years, maybe. "We shouldn't," I whispered, even as I led him to the bedroom. "I know," he said, but neither of us stopped. Then the door burst open, and there was Brandon with a cake and half my family all screaming, "Surprise!" But here's what Brandon leaves out of his hilarious story: the look of satisfaction on his face. He wasn't shocked or hurt. He was triumphant. He'd known exactly what he'd find, had orchestrated this whole scene for maximum damage. He'd hired a private investigator, known about Daniel for weeks, and instead of confronting me like an adult, he planned this elaborate humiliation. The kazoos. He brought kazoos. Who brings kazoos to a birthday surprise unless they're planning to make it a circus? And that's exactly what he wanted. A spectacle, with me as the main attraction. My mother dropped the cake and just stood there staring. My father started yelling at Daniel, who was trying desperately to get dressed and leave. My sister was recording everything on her phone, because apparently my worst moment needed to be preserved for posterity. And Brandon? He stood there with this smirk, pretending to be devastated while secretly loving every second. "Surprise, honey," he said, his voice dripping with fake shock. "Though I guess the surprise is on us, right?" My mother started wailing, actually wailing like someone had died. "Rachel Marie, how could you? In your marriage bed." My father, red-faced and shaking, pointed at Daniel. "You get out of here before I—" "Dad, please," I begged, clutching the sheet around me. "Don't you dad me," he spat. "You're no daughter of mine." My sister, still filming, was narrating like this was some reality show. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." Brandon's friends, why were his friends even there? Were hooting and hollering like this was entertainment. One of them actually high-fived Brandon when he thought I wasn't looking. The aftermath was worse than the moment itself. Brandon's version makes it sound like I was some unhinged harpy, but what actually happened was pure panic. Here I was, naked and vulnerable, with my entire family staring at me. I grabbed a sheet, trying to cover myself, while everyone just kept staring and shouting. "How could you?" my mother wailed, as if I'd committed murder. "Get out!" I screamed. "Everyone get out!" But they wouldn't leave. They stood there in my bedroom, in my private space, judging me. Brandon had turned my family into his audience, and they were all too happy to play their parts. Yes, I blamed them. I blamed my parents for walking into my home uninvited. I blamed my sister for immediately taking Brandon's side. I blamed his friends for standing there gawking. But mostly, I blamed Brandon for orchestrating this circus, instead of just asking for a divorce like a normal person. The throwing things he mentions? I threw a pillow. One pillow, while trying to get dressed and get 7 people out of my bedroom. But in his version, I'm a violent psycho who attacked him. What really hurt was his accusation that I'd ruined my relationship with Daniel. As if Daniel was just some fling I was protecting. Daniel was the only good thing in my life, the only person who saw me as more than Brandon's neglected wife. And Brandon made sure to destroy that too. The private investigator Brandon brags about hiring? He'd been following me for months, taking pictures, documenting my every move. Instead of that money going toward the couples therapy I'd begged for, it went toward proving what he already knew, that I'd found happiness elsewhere. I found out about the PI during the divorce proceedings. Brandon's lawyer produced photos. Me and Daniel having coffee, holding hands across a table, one kiss in a parking lot, timestamps going back 3 months, which means Brandon knew for 3 months and said nothing, did nothing, just collected evidence and planned his ambush. "You knew?" I asked him during mediation. "You knew for months and you just—" "What? Waited?" "I needed evidence," he said coldly. for the divorce. You needed to humiliate me, I corrected. You could have just asked for a divorce. You could have confronted me privately. You chose to destroy me publicly. You destroyed us, he shot back. I just made sure everyone knew it. The compensation he got in the divorce? He's talking about my inheritance from my grandmother. Money that was legally mine, but that he got because his lawyer painted me as a cheating witch who deserved nothing. Never mind that I'd supported him through unemployment, paid more than my share of bills, been faithful for years while he treated me like furniture. $20,000 my grandmother left me. Money she'd saved working double shifts as a nurse. Money she'd wanted me to use to follow my dreams. Instead, it went to Brandon as punishment for seeking love where there was none. My father taking Brandon's side still breaks my heart. But Brandon doesn't mention how he'd spent years cultivating that relationship, playing the perfect son-in-law while treating me like an afterthought. Of course, Dad believed his version of events. Brandon had made sure of that. The truth is, I'm happier now. Despite the humiliation, despite losing half my family, despite Brandon's continued attempts to paint me as the villain in his story, Daniel and I didn't work out. How could we after such a traumatic beginning? But I learned what it felt like to be valued, to be seen, to be loved. Brandon wants people to think he's clever for his birthday ambush. But what kind of person plans something so cruel? What kind of husband chooses humiliation over conversation? What kind of man brings your mother to watch you at your most vulnerable moment? He could have just divorced me, could have confronted me privately, could have tried to fix our marriage before it got to that point. Instead, he chose cruelty and called it justice. So, yes, I had an affair. I found comfort with someone who treated me like I mattered. And for that, Brandon made sure I paid the highest price possible. Not just the end of our marriage, but public humiliation that he still brags about years later. But I'm not sorry. I'm sorry for how it ended. Sorry for the pain it caused my family. Sorry Daniel got caught in the crossfire. But I'm not sorry for seeking love when my marriage had none. I'm not sorry for wanting to be more than Brandon's invisible wife. And I'm definitely not sorry that he showed his true colors that day. Not a heartbroken husband, but a calculating man who chose revenge over resolution. He gave me a birthday surprise, all right. He showed me exactly who he really was. And in a twisted way, that was the gift that finally set me free.